All right, so let's be honest. How much do you use social media? Has it kind of taken over your life?
Probably too much.
Probably too much. I think everybody would answer that way.
And think about our kids on top of that. How many hours might be on their screen time if you looked inside their iPhone?
But to be very, very self-disclosure, I preach to them that. And then they turn it right back around to me and say, Mom, you're on it just as much, if not more than us. And I do catch myself and I try to put it down. I try to walk away from it, but it's addicting sometimes.
It is. And you also have some really bad actors on social media.
That's true.
And I'm afraid of that with my kids all the time. But it's not just kids, it's adults as well. And the premise, a story that is just shocking, is part of a movie that was locally produced called Social Media Monster, Mindy. And it's getting a lot of awards. So we thought, why not have the folks in to talk about it?
We love to do this, especially when it's local. And when you have such a powerful story to tell and to share it with our listeners, I think it's so important. So do the introductions,
Yeah,
Michaela.
I will. So
I worked with this guy right here for years, Seth.
Zaid White. Zaid White.
It's all good. It's fine.
And Peter John Ross, who I know as Ross, and I worked with Ross when I did a
Hilliard
video for the city of Hilliard. So the fact that these two have come together, it's pretty incredible. So Ross, what is this movie about? Let's ask you that first. Social Media Monster. It could mean a lot of things, but what is it truly about?
It's a documentary about a series of events that happened in St. Joseph, Missouri, a city I'd never heard of before, where just from some bizarre incident and a high hop spread out over Facebook and social media into kind of a war between this one guy and the city officials, people in the city. And I just found the story fascinating and had to tell it. Also because it's the same guy who had been harassing me for years online.
So it's a story that you had to tell. So walk us through the beginning. How long did this story take to make and produce and put together, and how did you do it so impactfully?
The biggest thing for me was it started 10 years ago when this guy started harassing me. But
how was he harassing you?
How did he find you?
Yeah.
You're here in Central Ohio.
To be technical, he's originally from Akron, Ohio. He doesn't really have a residence at the moment. He's homeless living in his car right now. He found me / I found him as on an indie film forum in 2012. Got into a disagreement, and then he started emailing me nonstop and has not really stopped. Although that's not true. He did stop recently when I was just granted a civil stalking protection order against him a few weeks ago.
Wow.
Well, kind of. Yeah, he's kind of stopped, but not really. He stopped emailing me, but is talking about me on Twitter live videos 4 to 6 times a day.
But that is what social media has done and become, is you can attack anyone at any time without any validity to it.
Completely.
Oh, I mean, that is his ultimate weapon, is the fact that because he's homeless, he doesn't have a job you can take away. He doesn't have a house you can take away. So he can say the most horrible things about a person, and there's nothing you can do about it.
So, Zaid, how did you sign on to this? Like, how did that work out?
Well, I mean, I've been producing and working on different projects over the years, and I've known Ross for several years now. And so he told me he finally wanted to tell this story that he had told me years earlier. Because I actually met him when this started, but it actually hadn't become what it is now. And then, so we were talking about it. He told me about it a few years ago. I told him then I thought he should turn it into a movie, do a documentary, because it's so difficult to get, it's one thing to just go on social media and say, I don't like you, or you're this, or you're that, or whatever, you're terrible at your job, blah, blah, blah. But it's something totally different to then start making threats. But even that's something totally different than trying to destroy somebody's real life. Because that's actually what this guy does. Ross hasn't gotten quite to the selling point, is that this guy, he doesn't just, he uses social media, that's his primary tool, and the internet. But then he takes that outside, and then he tries to get you fired from your jobs. He tries to get your families fired, from their jobs because you've disagreed with them, maybe publicly on social media.
So what do you want for people to get out of this once they sit down and watch the movie that you guys have created? What do you want people to get out of it?
I think the biggest thing, which has already started to happen, is it serves as a wonderful warning to this one specific person being, there's been people that have already approached me to ask for, it's not publicly available yet, so they'll ask for a private link to send to their boss because he's trying to get them fired. And they watch the movie and they're like, oh, okay, we don't have to worry about this. This isn't a legitimate complaint. This is just some guy with a grudge. And that's happened not only with people with their jobs, but even city governments in other cities. Like San Luis Obispo, California called me this past January saying, do you know this guy? And I'm like, yep. And then they asked to see the movie, sent it to them, and then they were like, now we understand what we're dealing with.
This seems insane. Mindy, this seems insane that some guy would have an axe to grind against all these people he only knows online and go that far.
But it seems like he crossed some type of legal lines right here. Are there any type of legal actions you can take against him?
That's one of the things that I think is the premise of the movie, is the bigger picture that isn't about this one guy is the laws have not caught up to how much we have shifted to social media. And so law enforcement is hamstringed by the fact that there aren't laws to back that up.
Because of freedom of speech.
And there's freedom of speech is an issue, but then there's also the whole idea of the Internet Decency Act, that Section 230 law that came up a lot, not to be political, but under Trump, one of his big complaints was, I want these companies to be held liable because Section 230 of the Internet Decency Act states social media companies have zero legal liability for anything a user does on their platform. And if the laws haven't caught up and they're not liable, what's the motivation for anybody to get involved to stop it?
And I don't feel like we've heard anything more about that. I felt like it was something during his presidency, but I don't feel like we've heard a lot more necessarily in the last few months.
And I'm torn on it because I heard 2 Google employees use the same description. They view themselves like a gun manufacturer. They have no responsibility for what users do with their products.
So tell me a little bit about the response that this movie is getting, because Zaid, I hear it's really great. I've seen it online. Lots of awards so far.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Ross has been great about sending this film to pretty much everywhere that he can. And everyone loves it. And I'm not trying to sell it here. I mean, everyone seems to really like the movie, unless they are found out by the subject.
Right. Then they're like busted. They don't want people to see this movie then.
Right. Well, he doesn't want anyone to see it.
Well, sure, but anyone like him, same thing.
Exactly. And so the places that he has reached out to, if he hears about it like in the moment or when it's been submitted, often because they don't want to deal with him because of the threats that he makes, the things that he says, they will say, you know what? Sorry, we're just going to pull it from our festival. Yeah, we're not going to show it.
There was one film festival that we had not only been admitted to, but they gave us Best Documentary. He contacted them with a made-up story about the film being racist and that I was a racist, that they're like, we don't have time to look into it. We're taking back the award.
What?
Oh, my gosh.
And they said, and this decision's final, don't talk to us about it anymore. It's like,
the film had nothing to do.
You've seen it. There's nothing about racism in it whatsoever.
No.
And so...
But this is who we're dealing with.
That's the thing is, but look at the power of that. Here's the power of it. He knows there's going to be people that are too busy to look carefully. And if he can do damage, guess what he's done to every festival since? I'm hitting this racism angle. It worked once. I'm going to keep trying it. It hasn't worked again yet, but that hasn't stopped him from trying.
Something has to change. Because this really can't go on. Because if you think of the way it is now and how it started, you wonder to yourself, how far can it go if no one does anything to stop it, or at least put limitations on it?
So divisive at times in these spaces. Do either of you have any hope for what's next, to Mindy's point?
That's a great question. I mean, the whole reason that, I'm here going by Zaid is because it's a pseudonym. Because,
which I almost blew at the very beginning of this segment.
We won't talk about that. It's fine. It never happened. But yeah, so,
You're using a pseudonym because...
I'm using a pseudonym because I just don't want to deal with what this guy can do, because I've seen the damage that he's done to Ross and Ross's career. And I've heard what he's done to other people, and I've seen other people. I mean, Ross has told me about this person came forward and have asked him to stop working on the documentary because they're being harassed simply for being affiliated, for being friends with Ross. So he will go after your family, your friends, whoever he can to get what he wants out of you. And the sad thing is it keeps working. And then because of the nature of the internet and social media, the police don't know what to do about it. So they just kind of don't do anything. Same thing with like the FBI, because he's not in Ohio. So he's saying these things across a whole country, you know. And
So you have hope or you don't have hope?
we'll see how things are, but anytime soon, I think that we're still kind of, you know, off the deep end with it.
So I'm sure we have made people a little interested in what we've been talking about. If they want to see the film, how can they?
We haven't released it publicly yet. There's still a few things in the works for possible distribution. I don't want to say anything too much yet, but I would say early 2023, it will be widely available one way or another.
Ooh.
It's awesome. It's awesome.
Well, you had a screening in Columbus last week. Are you going to do any more screenings, or was that like it?
We might do more because enough people wanted to see it that didn't make it. So we're considering other screenings. I might have one in Cincinnati in the next 4 or 5 weeks. We might have one. It's not a film festival, but there's a screening being put together, and they asked me to have it play, and I said yes, but we're working on the details. So there will be a Cincinnati screening in the first week of October.
Well, thanks for coming in, both of you, and sharing this very important message, because something really does need to be done. There has to be some type of limitations to what people can say or do, especially when threats are involved. This has to be that way.
Families' lives getting ruined, people
Yeah,
in some
it's
cases
crazy.
committing suicide, not saying with this guy, but with other situations. It makes me really sad that that's where we are.
And then
But
you wonder if nothing does get done, really, how far will it go and
Will
can
it
it
go?
continue?
you guys are shining a spotlight on it. So Social Media Monster, again, Ross said it here, look for it to be widely available in early 2023. Ross, Zaid, thanks for being on What Matters.
Thanks so much.
Thanks for having us.